Hi everybody, I'm Jay, I'm an addict. Thanks Chris, I think. Can you guys hear me? Yeah. Okay, I have a bad problem with getting real quiet. I want to thank the committee, and up until this morning I didn't want to thank the committee because I don't enjoy this. But you know, I went out and I was talking to my higher power for a few minutes, and you know, it's all right. It's all right. You know, it ain't about me. So I thank the committee and thank you guys for putting all this on and all the work. Thanks everybody for showing up. You know, I've had a really good time. Last night at the countdown, they did it a little different, and that was cool, you know. And it was really cool to see. You know, there was. I know one person with one day. Was there more than one person? There was a few people with one day, and you know, welcome. You know, if you're new, welcome. And I'll tell you why in a little bit, but and then we got to the end, you know, and it's 25 years and up, you know, and you know, every year is important, you know, and every day is important, and I just wanted to recognize Snoopy over here, who has 29 years. You know, if the people that came before us hadn't come before us, there wouldn't have been anything here for me. I don't know. I've been really nervous because, like, Joey, Friday night, you know, he's a funny guy, and Roseanne did a great job last night, and this is not my deal, you know. Put me in my home group, sitting at the house with coffee with a bunch of addicts, you know, I'm fine. I'll talk all day long. Put me up here in front of everybody, it's a different story, you know. And you know, the only story I got is mine. I don't speak for Narcotics Anonymous, and I'm going to tell you that because I have opinions, and I'll try not to give them, but if they sneak out, just realize that I don't speak for NA. And you know, I grew up in California, and the way I was raised was pretty hectic. You know, it was one of them places where you learn to duck early, you know, and things, it wasn't bad though, you know. You learn how to deal with what you got, and things went on. I started getting loaded when I was about 12. Started getting in trouble by the time I was 13. You know, I was awarded the court, on probation, all that stuff. I got a job finally when I was 18 at this place that paid good money, and you know, I had dropped out of school and I had a record, and they hired me anyway, and I was 18 years old, making good money, man, and what that meant to me was I could buy any dope I wanted, and so I did, and they shut that plant down. And when I was 20, I don't know, I worked there for about 5 years and they shut it down. And I started wandering around. I wound up in Texas for a while, and I'd been laid off for a few years, 3 years, and I was laboring down there. Well, I labored a couple times. Most of the time we would go out. Most of the time we would go out at night and steal all the copper wiring from construction sites, and then we would sit around all day and strip wire and go turn it in, so we had beer to go out and steal wire the next night. And and that was pretty much my life. They called me and told me to come to Missouri if I wanted to go back to that place to work for that company. And so I came out here in '84. Everybody, all my history was gone. Everybody I used with, grew up with, was on the West Coast, and so I come out here and all that was gone. And I made some new friends partying out here, and for about 3 years, and things got pretty bad pretty quick. And then I got this settlement, and I got in a car wreck, and I got this settlement, man. It was a lot of money, and I was working at this place making a lot of money, and when I went to treatment, I was staying with some friends in a condemned house, in the spare room of their condemned house where they kept their dog, on a mattress on the floor, and there was dog shit on the floor and on the mattress, and that's where I lived. And that's pretty much how my life was, Money didn't make it better. There was nothing I could do to make my life change. I couldn't hold relationships. I lost that job, doing stupid stuff loaded. I got my second DWI, and so I went to treatment. Well, first I went to the stress unit. I thought, that's it, I'm stressed, And in this stress unit, I want to tell you this. In the stress unit, there was this gal in there, and there's always a gal, and all these groups she's talking about. She was a member of several 12-step fellowships, and every group, it's all this step this and spiritual that, and I'm in my room, after we leave group, I go back in my room, pull the panel away in the ceiling and get out my weed and my whiskey, and kick back the rest of the day. One day I said, man, why don't you shut up, Wake up and smell the coffee. The world does not evolve around your little 12-step fellowship crap, and so then she zeroed in on me, right? And I wound up going to a meeting with her for all the wrong reasons, and I don't remember that meeting though. I remember there was about 5 people there, and I don't remember much else about it really. I don't remember what anybody said or any of that crap. But that was my first Narcotics Anonymous meeting, and I got out of there. I got kicked out of there, and they still were mad at me at work, and they told me to keep hiding out. So I went to treatment, or I was going to go to treatment, and so I decided I didn't want to do the detox thing. So a friend loaned me her apartment for 5 days, and I held up there for 5 days and didn't use before I went to treatment. And so then I went to treatment and did all that stuff, and I'm in treatment, and the gal that I went to that first meeting with calls me up and tells me that her boyfriend is coming down to kill me. And treatment centers are not fortresses, man. Anybody could walk in those places, and he had every right to want to do that, But so I had this counselor in there, and he was an old ex-priest, and so I went and talked to him. I said, hey man, here's the deal. I either need to know how to do this turning it over thing you're talking about, or I gotta go. And he says, well, what's going on? What's going on? I said, that's not important. I need to know how to turn something over, or I gotta leave. And he kept pushing me, just between you and me kind of thing, which if they tell you that, don't believe it. So I told him what was happening. You know, I said, you know, I'm not gonna sit here unarmed and let somebody come in and do that. You know, so either I have to turn this over, or I'm going. You know, and so he told me, he says, go back to your room and get on your knees and ask whatever you perceive your higher power to be. You know, tell him that you know, whatever he decides is right, you're okay with that. And so I did. I went back to the room and I was talking to this higher power, and I was raised in a religion, so that's the one I used. And I realized, you know, I was already on borrowed time anyway. You know, I should have been dead many times. Most of us should have been before we got here. And I was okay. You know, okay, if this guy does show up, all right. You know, but he didn't. You know, he didn't show up. I didn't sit at the window watching the parking lot. You know, I didn't worry about it. And you know, and that was an eye opener for me, man. You know, I think that was when I really started thinking maybe this will work. You know, because before that I didn't think so. And I got out of there and I went back to the condemned house for a couple weeks. And everybody would get up and go in the bathroom, you know, and I'd be sitting there watching TV like I don't know what's going on, you know. And you know, and you know, I'm going to meetings every day. I didn't have a car, so I'm hitchhiking and walking to meetings every day. And you know, this wasn't going to work, you know, staying at that place. And so I moved in with that gal. And moved to a town where I didn't know anybody but her. And there was one NA meeting a week. And I didn't have a car. I didn't have a job. I got fired from that job. So I had nothing to do but go to meetings. And so I did. And I went to a lot of meetings. I went to probably 7 or 8 meetings a week for a long time. And you know, and I did both fellowships when I got here. When I was in treatment, they asked me what book I want. Do I want this NA book or this AA book? I said, I don't know. And they said, well, what did you use? And well, I said, I used everything. I said, you know, but I always had a beer in my hand, so I guess I need the AA book. And you know, I didn't understand. At that point, I didn't understand what my problem was, you know, for me. I didn't understand what addiction was. I didn't know that addiction wasn't what I used or what orifice I put it in. It was obsession and compulsion, you know. And I did both fellowships for 2 or 3 years, and I got a lot out of both of them, you know. It got to a point where, for me, and this is just me, you know, whatever you do, if it's working for you, do it, you know. I'd rather you stay clean than do what I do and not, you know. But it got to a point where I could no longer sit in an AA meeting, and I wouldn't say I'm an alcoholic and an addict because I don't believe it's 2 separate deals. You know, I believe it's one disease. And I wouldn't, it got to where I couldn't go in there and say I'm an alcoholic anymore because I felt I was being dishonest. And because that's not how I understood my disease, you know. And so I quit going. And I've gone to NA only ever since, you know. And that was a long time ago. You know, I went to that, the first home group that I had was that one that I went to that gal with. I went with that gal too. And you know, there was 3 home group members, me, her, and another guy that came in drunk, you know, once in a while. And And then she switched shifts. Well, by the time I got out of treatment and moved in with her, I think I had 45 days or something, and I was alternate GSR of that group and sitting in ASC. And I didn't know what was going on, you know. She told me, you have a pen and a tablet, I have a pen and a tablet. I don't remember if they had minutes mailed out then or not. But she sat at the table with the GSRs, I sat in a chair right behind her, and we took notes, you know. And between the two of us, you know, the other home group member doesn't show up half the time. When he does, he's drunk. But so between the two of us, we're taking notes, but we got almost everything, you know. And I've been doing that ever since, you know. Not always an alternate GSR or GSR, but you know, I've always been involved in my area, and I've always been involved in my home group, and my home group has changed several times over the years for one reason or another. You know, changing shifts, moving, copping attitude or resentment, you know, whatever. You know, it's I had a sponsor that when I first got out of treatment, I got a sponsor, and he was this crusty old dude in AA, and I never called him. And you know, we talked about steps in the meeting, so I figured that I was working them, and and I learned, you know, I learned the lingo. You know, we have certain language, you know, and I learned it. When I was using, I could pop from group to group and be whatever I needed to be to get whatever I needed in that group, you know. And I did that here. And, you know, looking back at it, it makes me cringe at some of the things I must have said in meetings, thinking I was sounding good. But at 6 months clean, I went to California. I went back to California. It was my grandparents' 60th wedding anniversary. And I was going out there. I went out there for 2 weeks prior to this deal. And I was hanging out with my buddies, you know, seeing some of them. They were giving me shit about being, you know, weak, you know. You're just weak. And, you know, I couldn't explain this to them, you know. And so anyway, one day, the day before, bless you, the day before my grandparents' party, my old buddy come by, the guy I used to run with all the time, and come on, man, we're going over Palo Alto, man. We got to pick up a radio. There's no radio in Palo Alto. And I knew that, you know, and I went anyway. And he came by about 11 o'clock in the morning. By 6 o'clock that night, I was loaded, broke, had needle holes in my arm again, drunk, puking on the sidewalk. The car was wrecked. We'd been in a bar fight, and the cops had us standing there, and I'm hearing my old warrants come over the radio. And you know, things got better for me, you know. Nothing had changed, you know, and I'd been clean 6 months. I was going to meetings every day. I could talk some stuff, you know. But all I was an addict who wasn't using. And the cops, I guess my buddy had told them that I'd been clean and that I was living out of state. And so they told me, look, man, you go to a meeting, get somebody to come pick you up and take you to a meeting, and we'll let you go. And I said, okay. So I called my brother, and he comes and picks me up. And I've been going to a meeting. The 2 weeks I was out there, I was going to this meeting every day, you know, that I was out there until that day before that day, you know. And so I went to that meeting, and I stood outside, and it was getting dark. And I hate this part. And everybody's going in. And I didn't want to. You know, I was still loaded. And I didn't want to go in, you know. But I understood, that was the first time I understood my powerlessness and my unmanageability, and I understood surrender. You know, I was done. I knew that every time I used, my lip starts quivering, every time I use, that's what's going to happen, you know. Maybe not exactly. Maybe I won't get in a bar fight or hitting around a car or get busted, but I'm going to feel like that, you know. And because when I came, I didn't want to stop getting loaded, you know. I liked being high, you know. I liked being wasted, you know. The only thing I did well in my life was being a stoner, you know. And you know, what I wanted to change was how I felt all the time. I was always in trouble. Everywhere I went, I had to watch over my shoulder for who I screwed over yesterday. I had to call around and find out where I couldn't go today because of what I did last night, you know. I treated everyone badly because I was angry. And I was angry because I didn't understand. I didn't understand how people could have a job, a wife, kids, a house, 2 cars, a mortgage payment, and go through life doing this stuff. You know, I didn't understand how that worked. And so I was angry. I hated them. And I hated everything that looked like that, you know, because I couldn't have it. So, I walked into that meeting, and I walked in and I told everybody I'd screwed up, and sat there and cried. Because everybody in that room, I knew everybody in that room had stayed clean that day, except me. And that was the first time I really understood when they said, you know, you never have to use again. That was the first time I understood that. You know, I understood that I didn't have to use that day. And I came back to Missouri, got a different sponsor, and started working steps. And the sponsor was, you know, he put his boot in my backside a lot, and by the time I had my first year clean, I had been through all 12 steps, you know, the way he instructed me to do them. And I probably could have done a way more thorough job if I had taken a lot more time on them. I was afraid I'd get loaded. I was afraid. And so I hauled ass, you know, and I came back from Missouri, and you know, I was the GSR of that group then, and you know, with what 4 days clean or something, sitting in ASC, and I was also the treasurer, and the meeting was in a bank, so I had to go to the bank and get the key to the bank so we could go to have our meeting every Wednesday night. And they would give it to me, you know. And I didn't quite look like this when I got here. I had all of my hair, and I had a long beard, and most of the sleeves were ripped off all my shirts, and the ones that weren't were stained with blood, and they would give me a key to the bank. And the only reason they gave me a key to the bank was because I was a member of Narcotics Anonymous. And Yeah, that meant something to me. For the first time in my life, something was working, you know? Something was working right. And, you know, and I've stayed here. That was, the last time I used was May 29th of 1987. And, you know, I don't want to do that again. I don't want to feel that way again. I worked through the steps, gone through a couple marriages since I've been clean. I married that gal, got divorced, got married again, got divorced. You know, just because I got clean didn't mean I knew how to have a relationship. And just because I worked all through the 12 steps that first year, still didn't mean I knew how to have a relationship. You know, I told you briefly at the beginning that, you know, I grew up in a house where you had to learn how to duck. And that's what I knew about relationships, you know. And there was yelling and screaming and arguing and fighting and abuse and, you know, all that stuff. And I've been on both sides of it, you know. Sometimes I dished it out and sometimes I took it, you know. And I didn't like that. I don't want to be that way, you know. And you know, I'm not that way today. You know, I still have my moments when I'm when I'm a little temperamental. But you know, it's I want to talk about relationships for a minute. After I got divorced the second time, I was trying to figure out what I was doing wrong, and I looked at the kind of choices I made and what I was doing in my life, and I dated a few gals in the program, and I just didn't feel right, you know. I didn't feel right, and you know, I had what was that? Smyrna in Jeff City. Anybody remember that? Which one was that one? Yeah. I was at Smyrna in Jeff City, and there was a gal come up there from Redwood City. She was a Sunday morning speaker. And so Lori and Missy and all them knew I was from out there, and they introduced me to her. And we stayed in contact, and my folks still lived in the Bay Area, or my mom did. And so whenever I would go out to visit my family, I would call up Karen, you know, and she'd come pick me up, and we'd go to meetings and go hang out and do stuff like that, so I wouldn't have to stay at my mom's house all the time. So we were friends, and we stayed friends for a couple years. And she was telling me one time, we were out and went and met a friend of hers. She talked about a guy that helped her out early in her recovery, and had stayed her friend, a good friend, named Bob. And so we went, and she introduced me to Bob, and then we went and went down to the beach. We're walking around down there, and she was telling me how her sponsor was telling her that she needed to look for her spiritual equal. And and I liked the way that sounded. That sounded cool. That sounded good. That's what I need. I didn't know what it meant, but that's what that's what I needed. And but I started thinking about it, and one day, my sponsor's wife and me all went to California, and we were hanging out at Karen's house, and all three of them are, it was Karen really liked me, and I really liked her, but I was just like, this wall. And all three of them were saying, why don't you just let it go, man? And they kept at me, let it go, let it go, let it go, over and over. And to me, it felt like we were sitting there for 4 hours, and I was in this grueling, let it go, and tell me what the fuck it is, and I'll let go of it, all right? And I didn't know. I didn't know what it was. I know what it was now. I had, regardless of how much clean time I had, or who I was married to, or who I was dating at the time, whatever, it always wound up where I stood there and looked another human being in the eyes and saw the pain I caused. I didn't want to do that anymore. I didn't know what my alternatives were, but I didn't want to do that. And and I was afraid. Shortly thereafter, I did let it go, and Karen and I hooked up, and and it's been really nice. It's been kind, and it's been loving and respectful, and humbling, and I'm learning a lot. I'm learning a lot because I pay attention. I'm paying attention. I respect Karen. One of the reasons we were friends was she's really this calm kind of person most of the time, and and she chooses her words very carefully and thinks about what she's saying, and I don't. And one of the things I learned around here is if you see somebody that has something you want, hang around with that person. Learn how to get it. I'm not suggesting that you marry everyone that has something that you want. But it worked for me. she also has 2 kids. And that was another one of the reasons that I was really standoffish about the whole thing. Was she lived in California, she had 2 kids, their dad lives in California. I live out here, I got a life, she had a life going on out there. I didn't want to interrupt that all that. And I was afraid. And after we got married, we moved her and the boys out here. And excuse me. A couple weeks after she got here, I got real sick. I got pneumonia and septic shock, or something, I don't know. Anyway, I was laying in bed sleeping after work one night, and if this had happened a couple weeks before that, I would have died. Because nobody would have been there. I would have just laid in my bed and died. But she woke me up and told me we're going to the hospital, and I didn't really know what was going on. I knew I was sick because I couldn't think and I couldn't hardly walk, and went down there and I lived, and had a surprise. And I have Hep C, and so I was doing this treatment for that, and and this stuff has a tendency to make you really irritable. So I have this new wife and 2 new stepkids in the house, and I'm sick, And it was all I could do to just try to be civil a lot of days, you know. And I know I must have scared the hell out of them boys a couple times, you know. 'Cause they didn't know me, you know. And all they knew was, you know, there's this guy that you know, sleeping in the other room, that if you wake him up, he's not happy, you know. And you know, it had to be tough on everybody, you know, not just me. It was tough on them, and they put up with a lot, you know. They put up with a lot. You know, today, I have a really good relationship with those boys. Well, with the younger one, the one that's 15, he's still, you know, trying to warm up to me. It's not really cool, you know, to open up, and I understand that. And, but you know, today, I guess where I'm going with this is, you know, when I was telling you about, I didn't know how to make life work, and I hated everybody who had the house and the 2 cars and the mortgage and the wife and the kids and went to work every day. That's what my life is. And I'm not quite sure how that happened. You know, all this time since I've been clean, you know, I've changed sponsors a few times. I have the same sponsor now. The sponsor I have now, I've had for the last about 10 years. And, you know, I still go to meetings. I still have a home group. I still work steps. I still do service at my group and my area. I do a little bit at the region. You know, that's what they told me I had to do when I came here. You know, just because I've been here a while doesn't mean I don't have to do it anymore. And I've seen a lot of people over the years that have felt that, you know, after a while, you know, they didn't have to do this or that, or, you know, I don't need to go to the meetings, or I don't need to do service. I did my deal, you know. And, I don't want to be that, because when I was sitting in ASC and a lot of the people with more clean time than me that were there when I got there, you know, I don't know where they went. You know, their lives got busy. I don't know. You know, all I know is they weren't there. You know, and I needed them. And it scared me. You know, and I got resentful, and I felt like somebody lied to me. You know, they told me when I came here, this is what you do. You go to meetings, you get a sponsor, you work steps, you get a home group, you be a part of that home group, you do service. You know, that's what you do. You want to stay clean, do that. You know, so I did. You know, and then one day I was sitting at ASC and I'm thinking, where are these people? You know, and I felt like somebody had lied. You know, and I wanted to know who. You know, because I wanted to take care of it. But you know, the bottom line is it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter why they weren't there. You know, it's none of my business. My business is why I'm there. You know, and that's why I appreciate people like Snoopy with 29 years, and there was somebody else at 24 last night, and 18, 19. You know, it ain't easy. You know, especially when you're the one at the top of the rung. You know, as far as clean time goes. You know, who do you look to? You know, when your butt's in a ringer and you need somebody who went through it before you, where do you go? You know, sooner or later somebody's got to be the last man. You know, and that's hard. And it might be as hard as when you first get here, you know? When I first came here, it was hard just to not get loaded, you know? And there's been times in my recovery when staying here was hard. And there was times when I didn't want to go to meetings, and I didn't want to see any of you, and I didn't want to hear what you had to say, and I didn't want to share anything with you, you know? And so what I did was I went to meetings, and I sat in meetings, and I shared with you that I didn't want to see you, and I didn't want to hear what you had to say, and I didn't want to share with you. You know? I don't know what else to do. I don't know if there is anything else to do. You know? This thing, you know, we call it a we program. That's what we do. You know? I don't have to like what you say. I don't have to agree with anything you do or your God or your lifestyle or anything else. It's none of my business, you know? But if you're scared, I can understand that, you know? If you're confused, if you don't know what the next right thing to do is, you know? If you just need somebody to sit there and hold your hand, that's stuff I can do. I can do that. You know, I don't know how to fix your finances. You know, I don't know how to pick a wife for you or a husband. You know, I don't know how to do any of that. But the stuff that I keep the most secret, you know, which is usually the way I feel about things, is the stuff that we're the most alike about. You know, and if I can get past that fear and share that, you know, then you can understand me, you know? And, you know, I was in a workshop yesterday, and there was a guy in there sharing, and he got real, you know? He shared a lot of pain and fear and confusion, and I don't have to know what was going on in his life to understand those feelings, to understand how he felt. You know, that's the empathy of this program. You know, that's the therapeutic value of one addict helping another. I understand those feelings. You know, I know what it feels like to not think I have anywhere to turn, to not think I have any options left. Only to call my sponsor or talk to another addict, and they say, yeah, you do. You know, this is what you do. You know, sit down, don't make a decision. Let's go to a meeting. We'll talk about it tomorrow. You know, and I make it through another day. You know, I forget the basic stuff. You know, we read these things just for today, which, by the way, I won't read the meeting, because if you ask me to read, I'm reading. Shut up. Yeah. I mean, let's just be honest. I mean, if you're going to ask me, say, would you read this so we can all read this with you? You know, it's an honest program, you know? You know? And you know, don't get me wrong, do what you want. You know, I don't expect to change anybody's mind about anything. That's just my own personal thing. That's I don't read it. But anyway, the deal about just for today is that's what it is, just for today. You know, it's how am I going to make it today? You know, regardless of what goes on in my life, regardless of how I feel, you know, how am I going to keep putting one foot in front of the other and keep moving? You know, and you know, it's easy. No, it's not easy. It's simple. You know, it's simple. Hang on to another addict. You know, jump in their back pocket when you don't know what the hell to do. Grab your sponsor or your buddy in the program, jump in their back pocket and stick to them like glue, you know, until you do know, you know, and you know, it's the basic things of this program remain constant. You know, the principles, they work no matter what. You know, these principles work whether I get in a relationship at 3 days clean or not. These principles work whether I'm in jail. These principles work whether my spouse is using. You know, these principles work regardless of what the circumstances are. They're principles. You know, they're not just good ideas. You know, and the principles are in the steps. You know, if I want these principles to work in my life, I need to work the steps. You know, if I want to work the steps, I need to get a sponsor. If I want to get a sponsor, I need to go to a meeting to find a sponsor. It's real simple. It's the same things they told me. Go to a meeting, get a sponsor, work the steps. You know, and I forget. I want to complicate everything. I want to think about it all. You know, and the quickest way for me to find a loophole is to complicate it. You know, if I look at our legal system. Let's complicate the hell out of it. We'll find a loophole. You know, and I'll do that with this program. You know, I don't know. If I keep it simple, I'm all right. You know, and the simplest thing for me is to hang on to another addict. You know, that's all I have to do. Hang on to another recovering addict, and I will be all right. You know, I didn't want to come up here today. You know, because most of the time I still have that thing in my head where I'm not good enough. You know, I don't have anything to tell you. You know, and I don't really. Nothing that you can get out of the book. You know, or at a meeting, or from your sponsor. You know, because that's where I got it. You know, my life experiences are mine, you know, but these principles, they're the same. And, you know, and I can't, I have a friend of mine I used to sponsor. I'm going to make this quick and I'm going to stop. I have a friend that I used to sponsor several years back, and, you know, and he would continually get involved with newcomers. And, you know, right, wrong, and different doesn't make any difference. But that's what he did. And inevitably, in a short period of time, he found himself in a lot of pain. And, you know, because they acted like newcomers, you know. When I came here, I had no morals, you know. I had no ethics. I had no integrity. I would tell you whatever I needed to tell you to get what I wanted. I would do whatever I needed to do to get what I wanted, you know. That's what I knew. That's how I lived before I got here. When I came into this program, I hooked up with that gal. She was angry with me a lot because that's how I acted, you know. What did you expect, you know? And I've recently heard from my friend, and he's got 10 years clean now, and he's still doing the same thing, you know, and he's still in pain, you know. I don't have to pick up dope to live in the insanity of this disease, you know. If I'm doing the same thing over and over and over, and I'm creating problems and pain and confusion and all that stuff, doing the same damn thing, that's my disease, you know. I you know, I don't know what to tell him, you know. He called me the other day, and I don't know what to tell him, you know. The only thing I can tell him is, I love you, man, you know. You know what your problem is. You know what the deal is. There's nothing I'm going to tell you is new, you know. All I can tell you is I love you, and you know, if you need somebody to lean on, you know, here I am. You know, because that's what we do. You know, that's what I do. That's how I've gotten through all the mistakes and problems and pain and difficulty I've had. Another addict was there for me. You know, the therapeutic value of one addict to helping another is without parallel. You know, nothing matches that. You know, it's all simple. It's all in these little readings we read at the beginning of every meeting, if you can hear them. You know, and you know, if you're new, and you're not sure you want to stay clean, you're not sure you don't want to get loaded anymore, that's fine. Keep coming back. But if you're tired of living the way you've been living, and you're tired of feeling the way you've felt, you can change that here, you know. And there are people here that will help you do that. If you go to meetings, get a sponsor, work the steps, and get involved. You know, they told me when I first came here, there's places like those merry-go-rounds at the playground. Get in the middle. You know, if you're on the outside, you're gonna fly off. You know, because sometimes it spins. You know, and you know, get in the middle. And I guess that's all I got. Thanks.